This is Hot Science, and this is the week's top news in science, technology, and medicine. And it's hosted by me, Richard Clarke, and thank you for joining us. And to give you the rundown on this week's stories, the first story is a roundup from nature.com of 7 technologies to watch in 2023 for this year. And as you know, I've been saying for several years that one of the revolutions that we're in the midst of now is a biological revolution. And as a sign of that, 5 of the 7 new technologies that they're talking about are essentially biological technologies. That's how much an age of biological revolution that we're in. And in technology, the story I want to talk about is India tests its first domestic operating system days after a Google antitrust suit has a setback. And there is a government developing essentially a public operating system for mobile devices. India is the biggest user of smartphones and Androids in the world, and they have particular interest in the technology underlying the smartphones being freely accessible. And they think Google is too fussy. And in environmental news, the U.S. approved the first small modular nuclear reactor. And this really begins a new era for atomic energy. These are smaller, cheaper, easier to make and deploy, and have a reduced footprint and improved environmental safety over all the previous generations of nuclear reactors. And in materials, the article is blocking radio waves and electromagnetic interference with the flip of a switch. And this is a new material that can be sprayed onto something, and if you hit it with a little voltage less than out of a battery that's in your flashlight, then it goes from being shielded to open. So it's an EMI shield that is easy to apply and gives you the ability to turn it on and off. And it will turn out this will be very important for the current generation of communication devices, among other things, because you'd like them to be turned off and to be protected when they're not in use, but then you want the shielding to be open so they can communicate when it's time to communicate. And in space, I have pictures not from the web, I'm sorry, this week, but this is from the Hubble. And the Hubble captures a rare event, which is a star eaten by a black hole 300 million light years away. And in biology, it's a new killer CRISPR system that is unlike any that scientists have seen before. And this variation of CRISPR is a lot more specific than earlier generations. when I was reading this article, I came to understand something about CRISPR that I hadn't before. I thought that it was a technology developed by human beings and we're using it for genetic modification. It turns out CRISPR is a system that bacteria developed to fight off viruses. And we're just piggybacking on the bacterial magic. And in my human story is that humans still have the genes for a full coat of body hair. And so maybe if you think it's too cold in the winter, you could figure out how to turn those genes back on and grow yourself a full coat of hair. And finally, in medical news, is about the race to supercharge cancer-fighting T cells. You know, T cells are the killer cells in the immune system. And what they're trying to do is to figure out how to get them to kill those nasty cancer cells. And they're making a lot of progress. So let me get started with our stuff. And the first story is a little long because I want to go through each of those 7 technologies to watch in 2023. I'll still try to give you the stuff in highly summarized form because there is a lot of detail within it. And the first is a single molecule protein sequencing. You know, we've heard about all this DNA sequencing, and there's so many developments that are based on that. But what they call the protein, Proteome, protein, I guess, represents the complete set of proteins that are made by a cell. And this is deeply informative about health, but it remains challenging to characterize. And most analysis systems to analyze this proteomic analysis use mass spectrometry, but the details of this cannot always be identified, and low abundance proteins usually are overlooked in this. And so it's they're looking for something that is got more resolution. And now they have a single molecule technology that can sequence most or maybe all of the proteins in a sample. The way they're doing it now, one of them is fluorosequencing using fluorescent dyes and then watching molecule by molecule as they cut the proteins apart. Another one is a nanopore-based sequencing tool that uses changes that they detect when they put an electric current across the cell. Anyway, these are still fairly complex to do, but they are working and fairly well along with the capability of analyzing the proteins in the cell, like they're able to analyze the DNA in the cell. And a quote from one of the founders of a protein sequencing company says, quote, "It's not really a matter of whether it will work, but how soon it will be in people's hands." So they're saying, here is this new kind of measurement approaches that are going to let us understand the proteins in a cell like we're beginning to understand the DNA in a cell. And as we understand this, we're going to discover stuff. One of the big areas for discovery is when you have new tools that can see things you have never seen before. And every time you have those kind of tools, you find out new stuff. So they're going to find out more about proteins. Another of these is the Webb Space Telescope, and it's already in the first year. One of the things they know from it is there's actually no empty sky anywhere. Everywhere you look, there's just galaxies everywhere. We just couldn't see them before. And with the perfectly smooth beryllium mirrors coupled with the state-of-the-art near and mid-infrared detectors, the Webb can see things that the Hubble could never see. And that's one of the reasons it was designed this way. One of the things they're able to see with the Webb is they're able to measure the atmospheric composition of some kinds of exoplanets. So we can not only see the exoplanet, but we can evaluate the composition of the atmosphere. And one of the things that's planned for this year, researchers around the world are queuing up to get observation time. One of the researchers is looking at the creation and destruction of the cosmic dust that contributes to star and planet formation. And he says it's a completely different order of sensitivity and sharpness. So we have seen completely different phenomena going on inside these objects. It's amazing. So we're going to discover more about the planet formation and star formation this year. Now, the next one is another biological one, and this is volume electron microscopy. Electron microscopy already is well known for its outstanding resolution, but it only sees on the outside of things. And to see inside, say, a cell, then what you have to do is to slice it in a bunch of slices and then use your electron microscopy to view and image that slice and then analyze all the slices. A single cell can take 200 sections to look at a single cell this way, and assembling all that data is real complex. And now they have a volume electron microscopy technique that drastically streamlines the process. It improves the speed by roughly 200-fold, so more than 2 orders of magnitude. And because of that, now we're able to see things clearly that we couldn't identify before. Already using this tool, there are papers published mapping the cellular interior in more detail than they've ever had before. And they can see various type of organules and other subcellular structures in their full 3D volume. But with this tool, one of the researchers is talking about the feasibility of using these tools to reconstruct an entire mouse brain at high resolution. this is something he says is on the same order of magnitude as the effort to map the first human genome. So it's a big job. He thinks it'll take more than a decade of work and cost billions of dollars and produce 500 million gigabytes of data. But this would give us the most detailed view of advanced mammal brain that we have ever had. And again, who knows what they'll find out by doing that kind of mapping. Okay, the next is another biological one. This one they call CRISPR Anywhere. And CRISPR, the particular variant of it called CAS9, has already got a big reputation. There's lots that it's done, but there are limits to where it can be used. CRISPR9 is coordinated by a short section of RNA which directs the associated Cas nuclei enzyme to its target in the gene sequence. But this enzyme requires a nearby sequence called I'll just give you the short name, PAM. It's a photospacer adjacent motif, a PAM. And without this, the CRISPR doesn't know where to crisp. And then a genome engineer used protein engineering to create a near PAM-less variant of this. And these enzymes now can read practically the entire genome, whereas conventional CRISPR that we've heard so much about can deal with between 1% and 10% of the genome. This is going to deal with the other 90% of the genome. And if you realize that we've done a lot with being able to edit 10% or less of the genome, imagine what we can do if we can start fiddling with the other 90%. The next is high precision radiocarbon dating. And, archaeologists have been using, or anthropologists have been using radiocarbon dating since the 1940s, but the technique is usually only precise to within a couple of decades. But they use this new technique last year with the Viking explorers when they first arrived to America. They looked at wood that was found when they were unearthing the settlement, and based on that wood, they determined that the tree was likely to have been cut down in the year 1021, probably in the spring. So here we have radiocarbon dating that is plus or minus 20 years coming down to a specific year and even a specific season in the year. They think these tools, they want to use them to study other Neolithic settlements and sites of volcanic eruptions. This way they can get a good date for the eruption. They also want to use it to study the Mayan Empire, because there's so much we don't know about this. And these tools will give us the ability to create real good histories within these settlements at a very fine scale. So we'll be able to use this tool that gives us more details to understand our history much more specifically than we know now. Okay, next we have another biological one, and this is single cell metabolimics. And metabolimics is a study of the lipids, carbohydrates, and other small molecules that drive the cell. The metabolome is actually the active part of the cell. When you have a disease and you really want to know what's going on, you should look at the metabolites. Anyway, the metabolome encompasses vast numbers of molecules with different chemical processes, and some of these are highly ephemeral with sub-second turnover rates. That means they don't last very long. So anyway, this is another case where they have ways to do it now, but they are advancing the technology by providing an open source software tool that uses the imaging data to better profile the metabolic profile of these cells. And these are using standard mass spectrometers, which are not as expensive, and they're able to use them now and already have used the tool to profile hundreds of metabolites from thousands of human cells and mice cells. Now they are able to see all this detail, understand the patterns, and are assembling metabolimic atlases, which will accelerate progress in the field because now you have a way to look at and understand what you're seeing. And this is definitely one of the frontiers of science. And this is understanding, again, in more detail, what's going on within the cells, and specifically within it, doing the changes in metabolites. They say if you really want to understand if you have a disease, you want to know the cell state, and you really want to look at the metabolites. So I'm sure that this will show up having significant impact in medicine. And then the last one they're talking about is in vitro embryo models. One of the, to be able to understand how the human embryo develops from the zygote into a full human being is something that is important for our understanding of medicine and being able to diagnose and prevent conditions in childbirth. And we're really limited in our experimentation because around the world, generally there's a limit that you can't use a live human embryo older than 14 days to experiment on, because then you're experimenting on human life. And so they don't let that kind of experimentation go on. And so they've developed a couple of ways to create artificial human embryos without sex cells. They're starting from different kind of stem cell and fiddling with the stem cells. They can't get zygotes yet, which are the first fertilized cell, but they can get down to 8 cells. And this 8-cell stage is where a lot of the differentiation happens in the embryo. So if you can follow it from there, you can see the embryo develop. And in these artificial embryos that they're creating so far, they say you can see things like the development of the heart and the heart starting to beat. So they're making pretty good progress on being able to develop these artificial embryos, and as they develop them and are able to use them in research, then we're going to end up knowing more about life and human life and the way that it develops. So that's what we have on these things. Any comment on all these amazing tools? Or is your mind blown just like mine?
Yeah, it's overwhelming. No question.
And again, to me, one of the things that is extraordinary about this is all the different ways in biology that they are developing to look inside the cells in terms of the details of how cells work. And we know that's going to do some stuff in this artificial synthetic biology that they're talking about. They're already able to create synthetic cells that can not only eat and grow and prosper, but they can reproduce. And so this sounds awfully like we're learning to create life in the laboratory. I think a cell is alive, right? It takes in nutrients, it reproduces, it has a mother.
Crystal does the same thing. It's just not considered a biologic form, but what's happening here, I see, is that we're on the verge of being Dr. Frankenstein's.
That's right.
For real.
Right.
Not used parts, new parts.
That's right, new parts. Okay. And certainly, one of the things that will come out of this is their ability to grow new parts when we need them.
Or when we don't.
You mean I could have extra hands?
Sure. Why not?
Well, if we have extra hands, then we're going to have to rewire my brain because I don't have the control system for those other two appendages. But, it's just details.
All right. Well, how about growing you a new hand, not an extra one, a new hand that has a little pointer on it so you can manipulate your smartphone easier.
Okay.
That would be useful.
That'll be useful. I think it's still a temporary thing because the smartphones will end up being voice controlled. Having to point at the things is still too crude. They'll be voice controlled, that is, until we have the sensor in our nervous system where we're online real time.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, okay, the next story is about public software systems. And this is actually an area that I've been wondering about for some time. And I wonder if our for-profit social media, which is full of disinformation and driven by advertising and sales need, if this isn't a big part of the polarized society that we have now, which makes America very hard to govern. And so I wonder, this is not the article, this is just me. I wonder what if social media were a public resource, like the phone company was for its first 50 years. Now, India is thinking about what I think is maybe a first step. It's not with social media, but it's with mobile system operating systems. And so India's government last week tested a locally developed mobile operating system, BHAR, BAR OS, and this is a move that challenges the dominance of Google's Android. And Prime Minister Modi has been pushing for self-reliance and to boost and promote everything from local manufacturing to domestic startups. And this fits right into what Modi is trying to do. And India is the world's second biggest smartphone market. I guess China is the first, where 97% of the 600 million smartphones run on Android. And they have been fighting Android in court battles, saying that Google has exploited its dominant position by putting in place restrictions that makes it hard for small manufacturers to operate and make their products. And the India operating system wouldn't have those restrictions, so is easier to use. So this would be a government-developed smartphone operating system to compete with Android. And what I suspect is this might be the first step towards something like I had thought about, which are public social media systems. So to investigate this a little bit, then I asked ChatGPT about public social media, and I asked it first, what would be the consequences if governments created public social media? And ChatGPT listed 5. The first is the potential of censorship and the loss of freedom of speech. Certainly, you would think if there was in China, for example, it would be censored and restrictive. But then it's already the case in the systems that are there now that are private. The second would be increased government control and surveillance, and certainly I can see that as a fear. The next would be limited competition and limited innovation, and I think that might be the biggest negative, the limit to innovation, because one of the things you get from the capitalist system is there's an incentive to innovate and have the next new thing. The fourth, they say, are issues with privacy and government and data security. And then finally, challenges in ensuring impartiality and fairness, which is not a small issue. Then I asked, what are the problems of an uncontrolled corporate-owned social media? And again, ChatGPT gave me 5. The first is the spread of misinformation and propaganda. And certainly we have been seeing that. And there is talk that stuff like that affected the outcome of the 2016 presidential election in the US. So that's not an unknown problem. Second is polarization and division of communities. And I think that we have seen that a lot. And I think these media systems, Twitter and Facebook and the ilk, are one of the things that are breeding this polarization, because appealing to particular groups and feeding their prejudices gets you more action on your site. And you sell that action, you sell the clicks to your advertisers, so it makes you more money. The third problem is addiction and negative impact. And again, the private system are in the business of getting clicks that they can sell to advertisers, so they want to keep you clicking. And that's not always good for people. Then still there are privacy violations and data misuse as an issue with corporate owned, just like there are privacy issues with government owned. So I think that may be a wash. The data misuse, though, is more possible in the private system. And then the last was unfair content moderation and biased algorithms. And again, we have seen that going on, and we have seen that affecting the political environment and stuff like that. So this is what's going on and what I think are the potentials. What do you guys think about the general subject of private versus public social media?
Public social media means government-controlled social media. And I'm not sure that one favors that.
Well, and the question is, why not? I mean, all the problems in the article listed for public or private are identical. They're the same problems. The only difference between the two is whether there's one organization dealing with these problems or 10. And the second issue is, what's the motivation of a government, a public system versus a capitalistic system, corporation? Well, government's only motivation ever in the history of time is controlling people. On the other hand, corporations have a motivation to make money. They don't really care about the control part as long as they're making the money.
But if you use the telephone as an example, the telephone went through more than 50 years where it was essentially a public utility, and that meant government utility. And what they were interested in doing was getting people to communicate. And how is that different than the social media, where it's a tool that uses the internet for more person-to-person communication than we've been able to have before? So to me, it seems like maybe it's an analogous situation. And the problem with particularly that comes through the polarization that is created by the private systems, I think is a real problem. I read about it as I read the political news from America. I read about the problems every day. And, certainly these systems contribute to that problem. And it seems to me you don't have to. I don't know how to do it, but it seems like thinking about another way to do it might be worthwhile.
A fascist state approach is not perfectly desirable. Having a variety of capitalists managing these social networks is a better alternative than state run.
And let's remember, what's the first use government made of the telephone system? It tapped it to survey every American that they wanted to on the telephone. So I think we've seen what government will do with such a system versus what corporations will do with it.
Which the corporations, of course, tap it and use the information for their own good, particularly to be able to sell my information to companies, and I don't have any choice about whether they do it. And you could argue that they're selling my information without my permission is an abridgment of my rights.
But that's relatively benign compared to wanting to use the information to control your behavior.
But the corporations want to use it to control my behavior. It's just they're doing it differently. They want me to buy stuff that I don't need. Anyway, it's another way. The other way to you could deal with perhaps some of the issues are regulation the behavior of corporations, but my experience is the people who favor corporations without the undue interference of government. And my opinion is that's not working now, and we need to do something different. And so this is just another idea. Maybe we could offer the public corporations as an alternative. So if you want to use Facebook, you could use Facebook. And if you want to use US Book, you could use US Book.
Well, this is democracy. I think we need to take a vote on that.
Well, if you're doing it with a government system, you have to take a vote on it. If you're doing it with a capitalist system, no vote is needed.
So
it
I think
turns.
we found that voting doesn't really change government behavior. It only changes government personnel.
Well,
Big difference.
it does change government behavior. It doesn't turn on a dime.
Okay.
Anyway,
We lived
continuing
on different
along.
planets.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But anyway, the next is the U.S. has approved the first small modular nuclear reactor. And this really is a new era for atomic energy. And this is from a company, NuScale Power, and it's a smaller nuclear reactor, and it could usher in an era of cheap and clean power in the U.S. And so what happened recently is the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission approved the design of the first small modular nuclear reactor in the U.S., and it's the first of a new generation of reactors that say they'll make nuclear energy more widely used, and it's using water-cooled reactor technology. And these small modular reactors, they're called SMRs, they can be built faster, cheaper, and take up much less space than the existing technologies. The smaller reactors generate less power, but they can be manufactured quickly in a factory on demand. And as a community needs more power, they can just add more reactors. And so far, it looks like they're safer and have far fewer points of failure than traditional reactors. And so the public is wary, particularly after Chernobyl and Fukushima, of the problems that can happen from nuclear reactors, and the public is wary, and because of that, it has slowed the development and release of new reactors. But these small modular reactors, if they are as safe and cheap as advertised, would represent a carbon-free advance in power generation. And these pressurized water-cooled reactor technology, the concern I would have was fuel disposal. So I asked my research buddy, ChatGPT, about it. And the fuel disposal process that they have is a multi-step. You store it for a while and let the radioactivity decay and decrease in the fuel. You transport it. You may reprocess it, and I'm not sure how much of it is reprocessed. I think it's more of it with these water-cooled reactor technology. Overall, it's about 30% of the fuel is reprocessed. Then you store it, the final storage is you put it in canisters in the ground in a bed of clay or stable rock for a long time. They say it is a safer process. I don't know what the facts are, but it does look like this will be a way to turn nuclear power back on in the US and other places in the world. Here I have a picture for you, if I can get it up. So this is what about a nearly gigawatt reactor. This is 924 megawatts. It's on 0.05 square miles. So that's just a few acres. What is that? 32 acres. And this is much more efficient in terms, if you compare it in terms of land use to wind or solar, it's the same power comes from 94 square miles in wind or 17 square miles for solar. So this is much smaller than the existing nuclear reactors and has a much smaller footprint than the renewables. And so if this is accepted and starts to be implemented, it will change the energy situation pretty significantly. What do you guys think? I know, Norman, you've been talking about this kind of stuff for a while.
Yeah, one of the major problems with wind, solar, or smaller nuclear electric facilities is the grid, the distribution of the energy, the transportation.
Right.
We can transport data, communications very easily, but high quantities of electricity coming from various points is a real issue.
Right.
And there are regulatory issues related to the reconstruction of the grids to allow multiple points to provide energy.
Now, I think with the Biden programs with infrastructure and stuff like this that are going on, aren't there big investments going on in terms of upgrading the grid now in the US? So at least you're not the only one that has heard about that. And it looks like our evil political systems are trying to actually do something about it. So anyway, this starts to open up the nuclear power, not just in the US, but in the world, because the same issues that we have, they have everywhere in the world. One of the things I like about it is having a smaller footprint and being modular and being faster to construct, being able to build the reactor in a factory and ship it to the site instead of building these custom things in every site makes just that part of it so much more effective. Okay. Now, the next is a material story, and it could be that Norman is the only one here who really gets this story. But now researchers have developed a thin film device that is fabricated by spray coating that can block electromagnetic radiation with a flip of a switch. That means it can be turned on and off. And it's using a kind of 2D material called MXenes. That's MXENENES, MXenes, and they were discovered about 10 years ago. And they believe that this is going to strengthen wireless connections and secure mobile communications against intrusion. And what they have discovered with these MXenes, when they're combined with an electrolyte solution, can be turned into a potent active shield against electromagnetic waves. And so the shielding is turned on when a small voltage is applied, and it gives you dynamic control of the shielding against EMI, which is something you don't have with copper or iron. And this is particularly important with the electronic devices working at gigahertz frequencies and other communication technologies. These, to be able to operate at these high frequencies and low energy consumption, these are really very sensitive devices made of sensitive circuits that are very affected by EMI. So being able to shield them from that EMI means that it's going to work better. And they say because the way in which these devices are proliferating, the urgency of the challenge of shielding them against EMI is becoming bigger and bigger. So something like this could have a broad impact. And they say, quote, without being able to control the ebb and flow of electromagnetic waves within and around a device, it's a bit like a leaky faucet. You're not really turning off the water, and that constant dripping is no good. Our shielding ensures the plumbing is tight. So again, the fact that this is applied via a paint sprayer makes it remarkably easy to be able to implement, and you end up being able to make devices that, among other things, you can hide devices from detection by radar or other kind of systems. You also can make devices that have a shielding switch that would allow a device that you're using, say, for hostile purposes, to remain undetectable and protected until it's time to use it. So you can make things that you can deploy in weapon systems and hide until the moment you need to use them. And they can protect communication equipment from being influenced or tampered. And again, it gives the ability to protect sensitive equipment that is much better and cheaper than putting a copper coat around it as a shield.
If it's an alternative to a Faraday cage,
Yes.
it's a great advance.
Yes, it is. I knew one of my friends in California was a brilliant analog engineer, and he had his lab that was shielded on 6 sides in copper.
Mhm.
Would this be effective against solar flares?
I don't know the frequency range, so I think solar flares are higher frequency, but I don't know. Maybe.
That would be very advantageous.
Uh-huh. Well, certainly I know in the when I was in the semiconductor industry for the space program and things like this, one of the things regularly they would work on were circuits that were radiation hardened, that were less affected by the kind of radiation you're talking about. So I know it's an issue. Okay, so now let's move into space. And in space, I have a story. Black holes are gatherers, not hunters. They lay in wait, waiting until a hapless star wanders by. And let's see what happens when that happens. Here's a photograph, or an image rather, that was taken recently of a star system about 300 million light years away. And that bright thing is a star, and that long tail is the star being sucked into the black hole. You can see the black hole in the middle, it's black, but around the edges, there are these little bits of light, and this is from the radiation that is happening on the edge of the black hole as lots of material is sucked into it. My wife says, you can see the black hole, it's not black. But so these events actually are fairly rare. The astronomers have only seen about 100 of these in the universe so far. And they're excited because now they can see the details. And these events really happen over a very fast time scale, really a matter of a number of weeks. And they feel very pleased that they were able to get it at this time. If you look at it over the time, first it starts with a picture number one, a star going in the neighborhood. Then number two is what we have the photograph of here, which is the star being sucked in to the black hole. They say when this happens, they are detecting speeds in this stellar wind where this is being sucked in, that they're detecting speeds as fast as 20 million miles per hour. This is 3% of the speed of the light, and it's pretty fast. And then the third stage is, and what will happen next there is where the star's outer gases, or in the third stage, the star is shredded into little pieces as the gravitational forces pull it apart. And in the fourth stage, it forms a ring around the black hole and will all eventually fall into the black hole. And when it falls into the black hole, this will release a tremendous amount of light and high energy radiation. And again, this whole process happens within time frames of days or months. And NASA believes this shredding happens only a few times every 100,000 years. And so they feel very fortunate to be able to see it at this time and to be able to watch the whole process. And so they're going to be able to see a special show, and we'll know more what happens as a star gets swallowed up in a black hole. Comments?
Well, it was good to see Hubble back on board,
Oh, yes, indeed.
partaking in new science. I mean, it's kind of been put on the back burner since Webb.
I know. but
So-
it's a big universe.
Yeah, and even the what they captured it with was the ultraviolet cameras.
Right. Yes.
And the ultraviolet cameras aboard Hubble are 20 years old technology compared to what's on Webb today.
Does the Webb have ultraviolet cameras? I know it has infrared, but
Yep. It
Okay.
has it actually has ultraviolet and infrared, actually more than optical light.
right,
So it's interesting that Hubble actually took the UV photograph and not Webb.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, I was glad to see
Yeah.
something from our friend, the Hubble.
Yeah,
Right, the old boy.
yeah.
What do you think's going on at the event horizon? I see that all this star material is still orbiting around the black hole. I don't understand why it all doesn't just immediately collapse and totally cover the black hole. What's keeping
Well, it's still,
all this?
to begin with, it's going at a higher speed. So the higher speed maintains its orbital position around the black hole. But
Yeah.
because it's not getting more energy, it slows down. And after it slows down, then it falls into the black hole. And as it falls into the black hole, some of the material is sucked in and some of the material is turned into light and energy, which is radiated out.
I understand that part. What I don't, after it slows down enough, I don't understand why more of it isn't completely covering all of the black hole.
Well, if it slows down enough where it is sucked into the black hole by its gravity, then it's not going to be hanging there around the black hole because there's nothing to maintain its orbital velocity.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll have to ponder that.
the gravity is its greatest asset of a black hole is its gravity, and that's what sucks everything in. And what you're trying to ask is, I think, why doesn't it just suck it all in at once?
Exactly.
And I think I don't know the technology behind it, but perhaps it's like a whirlpool, water whirlpool, where the outside you can put a drop of dye on the outside and watch it circulate until it goes down the middle, but nothing goes, directly down the
Directly.
middle. It starts on
Okay.
the outside.
And
The
it,
toilet
it
metaphor did it
circulates
for me.
when it.
Thank you. Got it.
Okay. Then we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to speed up the next stories or cut them off. The biology story is about a new CRISPR system that they have discovered that they think will revolutionize this gene editing tool. And as I say, I learned here that CRISPR really started with systems that bacteria that while they can infect humans, they also can be infected by virus and have developed a defense system against viruses, which is called CRISPR. And so we've used one of the CRISPR chemicals, CAS9, to treat diseases and create healthier crops and all that stuff. What you've heard about CRISPR is all CRISPR9, but now they've discovered a new CRISPR protein, CAS12 alpha 2, which can operate much more specifically than the Cas9, and it can bind to any genetic material within the DNA strand, and then in some modes, then when it's activated, it starts to shred the material and kill the material. This causes it to kill an infected cell, makes it self-destruct. And if CRISPR-Cas12a2 is programmable, then they think they'll be able to use it to kill cells with cancerous mutations. And so far, it looks programmable. It also looks like you can use it to make a new generation of diagnostic tools. And so such a diagnostic test would be highly accurate, like the PCR test used for COVID-19, but inexpensive and easy to use. And we're just scratching the surface, but they think Cas12a2 is going to lead to much more CRISPR technologies that will benefit society. Comments?
Whoopee. Brave
Whoopee.
new world. Brave new
Okay.
world.
In many ways. Okay. The next story is a human story, and it turns out until about 1 million years ago, humans had a full coat of body hair, and then there were evolutionary changes that happened about 1 million years ago where we lost our fur coating. And they did a study comparing the human genetic blueprint to 62 other mammals, and they were examining how hairlessness developed in different species at different times. And this work identified new genes and regulators linked to body hair, and they think this discovery may someday be used to treat balding people. So this is a way to grow your hair back. They haven't talked about what I talked about. How about a whole furry body? But maybe they can do that too. And the trick they did in this study is they compared the genetic structure of different mammals that had the same situation and were able to discover common things about them within this part of the genetic system. And it turns out it's easier to understand the genetic underpinnings of losing your hair by studying 10 different species that had that happen than it is by studying one species. To find it in one species is like you're looking for the needle in the haystack. If you're looking at it over multiple species, then you're able to look at what is common within those species and then be able to see what's going on. Using technique similar to this, they have already been able to make identify regions, for example, that deal with eyesight and blindness. And this kind of study with the mammals that live below ground versus the mammals that live above ground is giving them insight into the genetic structure of vision, which they think will be something that will help be able to deal with genetic blindness. So today it was hair, today, tomorrow it's your eyes.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And maybe the day after tomorrow, it'll be hairy eyes.
Or
No?
a Harry Truman. How about a Harry Truman?
Okay. And then the last story is the dealing with T cells and cancer. The FDA first approved a kind of T cell treatment in 2017, and they were modified T cells called chimeric antigen receptors, and it treats a form of leukemia. And since then, 5 similar products have been approved, and more than 20,000 people have been treated for incurable and fatal conditions through this. And this looks so promising that there are more than 500 clinical trials that are underway for different variation. And this field is very active for cancer research and going beyond cancer research. And it's being driven by advances in gene editing, like the CRISPR stuff we're starting about, and also advances in synthetic biology. And, so far, though, the challenge in these kind of treatments is they require the person who is treating, they get genetic material from them and then use that to develop the specific custom treatment for that person. And while it's effective and able to treat things that cannot be treated otherwise, right now it is amazingly expensive, and a single treatment with these kind of CAR-T cells can cost about $500,000. So they have saved a bunch of people, but the people they have saved have all had piles of money that they could use on the treatment. What they are looking for is off-the-shelf approaches where they can make a treatment that can be used for multiple people. So far, they don't have any of them. The people who are developing these kind of treatments say they're coming, but we're not there yet. Of course, because of the cost, this kind of gene therapy is basically not available outside wealthy countries. So this is so much on the forefront of medical science that right now only the wealthy can afford it. And if you're schmucks like me, then I'll just have to tell you what a good life I've had and wave goodbye.
There's a solution to only the rich, the super rich, can get this treatment. You pass a law saying that there's going to be a lottery, and 10% of the lottery holders will be eligible for this treatment for free. And you'll be able to buy a ticket for this lottery if you want or not. But if you buy a ticket, then instead of there being 9 other people in the selected, they'll
I think we need to
eventually there'll be a whole bunch of people getting it for free. See,
that's right.
Paid for by the rich people.
Your ratio you're talking about with the one person cured for the 10 people in it, if it is costs $500,000 each, then the tickets would cost $50,000 each, and I still can't afford it. So
no. One guy buys the ticket. See, he can buy into this lottery
sure,
group,
I know, but
nobody else has to buy in. See.
But anyway, the lottery has to pay for the treatment. Otherwise, it's government subsidy, and we know
That's what I'm saying.
Government is evil, so we can't do it that way.
The ticket will cost enough to treat 10 people.
If it costs $500,000 to treat one person, then the ticket has to pay for 10 treatments.
That's correct. And if you're super rich and you want a chance to get in the lottery, you come
okay.
up with the billions.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right.
Anyway, I suspect that's not going to treat many more people that are being treated in the current system.
Well, okay.
Anyway,
We can try.
okay, good thinking though. It's good thinking about solutions instead of problems. So I like that. So anyway, thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you next week.
Good to see you, Richard. Bye-bye.
Good to see you too. Adios.